Welcome back. Joining us to share his views on the news this morning is our familiar friend, Matt Driskill, who actually is now with the Today paper as an executive editor of Foreign News. Great to have you on the show, and welcome to the company,
Good morning.
Matt. This from the South China Morning Post. Communist Party elite give backing to Xi Jinping's drive for legal reforms. The Communist Party announced legal reforms out of its fourth plenum as it tries to clean up a court system plagued by bribery and influence peddling, while ensuring full control over it. And in the New York Times, China moves to enact rule of law with caveats. Among the planned reforms, moving judicial budgets to provincial authorities to minimize local interference into cases. And that has been contentious because it has created public mistrust of the party. And this from Channel News Asia's website. Beijing embraces rule of law with Chinese characteristics from Xinhua. The state media affirming the party's pledge to govern according to rule of law and announced the expulsion of 5 party officials for corruption, many with ties to Zhou Yongkang. That's the security chief that's under investigation right now for corruption. So interesting legal reforms announced out of this plenum. Matt, what do you make of it? Do you think it's groundbreaking at all?
I'm smiling because I think China talks a very good game when it comes to the rule of law. And I have a very interesting relationship with the law. I was actually supposed to be a lawyer when I was growing up. My mother was a lawyer. My eldest brother was a lawyer. I was supposed to join the family law firm. I used to cover the courts. So I love the law and I love the rule of law. And I think it's such an important thing that I can't help but smile because China, you know, they're sort of, they talk a good game when it comes to it. And I love the quote in the story where the rights lawyer wrote in the Oriental Daily News, he said, China talking about the rule of law is like a rooster dreaming that it can lay eggs. And I think
at least it's dreaming, though.
And I think the guy's spot on.
Isn't that something to say? At least it's dreaming?
Well,
I think it's saying that it recognizes there needs to be some level of independence.
Yeah.
The problem for me here, though, is that they talk about independent judiciary, free of sort of political interference, but it puts judicial authorities in a very difficult position if there is any political interference. And they've made it clear that there will be political interference when sort of politics are taken into account, when issues of politics come into the fray. They're going to be in a difficult position, then, wouldn't you agree?
They're already in a difficult position because of that, and that was what I was thinking about when I had read the story is, until you have an independent judiciary that can rule against the government, which you will never see in China, the judiciary will never rule against the Communist Party. No way, no how. It will be a cold day and you know where before anything like that ever happens. But until you have that, then you can never have true rule of law. And it's another reason why, you know, everything's been going on in Hong Kong recently. When the government came out with its white paper in August, I think it was, and even before then, when they were saying that judges in Hong Kong need to love the country, need to be patriotic, it raised a lot of eyebrows in Hong Kong. I was going to say something else, but it raised a lot of eyebrows in Hong Kong because Hong Kong does have the rule of law, and an independent judiciary in Hong Kong is extraordinarily important to the success of that economy there.
But some of these articles are talking about cities and places that are far from Beijing, and it's addressing the issues that the average person is facing. It mentions one of these articles where a local businessman was, you know, kind of was a subject of fraud, right, and didn't get the money that he was due from a very powerful influencer in his district. And the judges didn't rule in his favor because of all these kind of political connections.
Well, and then the story went on to say he and his wife actually were taken to a different county and thrown in jail and,
yeah,
and all of that.
So that's kind of the corruption they're addressing. So at least they're doing something on that local level. Wouldn't you give them credit for that?
No, I'm not going to get, no. Again, you know, I think China is a great country and it's on its way to becoming a great power. But I think until it is able to recognize its own shortcomings and say, okay, if we really want a truly independent judiciary that can address these problems, and not just on the local level, but on every level. And I don't want to I'm an American and I don't want to be like some flag-waving, patriotic, blah, blah, blah. But when you look at Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and George Washington, they did a pretty good job when they came up with the separation when the three different branches of government, when you have the legislative, judiciary, and the executive. And to have an independent judiciary is extraordinarily important. And the government has lost lots of cases in the U.S. So
yeah, I thought it was interesting that you brought corruption into the conversation as well, because we're talking about two slightly different things here. You've got judicial independence, and even if they have judicial independence, that doesn't mean that the courts are going to be free of corruption as well. So
corruption on, I guess, the cases that are involved, right? Because you're talking about two parties they're fighting for something, and they don't want one of the people, because they have ties to the court, to win.
I just mean that corruption is perhaps a different issue that needs to be addressed separately to judicial independence in the courts.
well, and again, I mean, and I love the quote also from the guy at Harvard University, the visiting scholar there. He says China wants to use the rule of law to control society and control the public. So am I going to give him credit in this case? No.
Well, it has to start somewhere, I would have to argue. Rooster dreaming, at least the rooster isn't just sitting there.
Well, perhaps it's a recognition that there is a bit of a problem there. But anyway, we've got to move on to our next article, and this one's from today, Singapore's Today newspaper. Japan's new trade minister hit by scandal. This follows the resignation of his predecessor, Ms. Yuko Obuchi, over allegations that her support groups had misused political funds. It was revealed Mr. Yuichi Miyazawa owns shares in a company his ministry oversees, and his political support group had spent money at a racy bar. Actually,
speaking
in the
of
article,
corruption,
in the article, it actually says that it was a sadomasochism bar, to be precise. You couldn't make this stuff up, could you?
No, it's
and also, it's not just any company. It's TEPCO. It's Tokyo Electric Power,
Yeah.
which is
well,
has
I
all
think
sorts of
it's two different things. His support group went to the sadomasochistic bar, which I'm curious to
to each his own.
to drop in sometime and see exactly what they're talking about here. Is it people with
It's exactly
whips
what
and,
you think.
But they claimed it as political spending, entertainment expense. What kind of politics is going on in that bar?
It could be true. It could be true.
He did acknowledge that it was a mistake and embarrassing and stuff, but he also did say that it wasn't he himself that went.
Okay.
Well, just moving away from political fetishes, let's talk about TEPCO. Specifically, in fairness to the minister, he said that he feels that he's got a responsibility to hold on to the shares given the position of the company. But there's a big issue there when
he's overseeing it.
Well, when he's overseeing it for a start, but also and time again, you're questioning why politicians aren't declaring these these things that may put them in shady light.
We saw that with Leung Ching-ming.
Well, yes, there's the sort of obvious one that everyone's talking about as well.
The problem is, it's never the crime; it's the cover-up that always gets you in trouble. And when you if Bill Clinton, when he got in trouble for his shenanigans and all of that, if he had just come out and said, "Yes, it happened. I was with this woman," instead of lying about it, he wouldn't. That would have been a problem between him and Hillary. Instead, he got impeached for it. Same with Richard Nixon and Watergate and all of that. Although I'm sure a lot of the viewers are probably wondering what's Watergate, unless they're my age. But, again, and he says he's going to hang on to the shares, but he's going to put them into a trust, which is what a lot of U.S. politicians do. They set up a blind trust to hold all their holdings. In this case, I think if he's overseeing TEPCO, I think it's a clear conflict of interest.
Yeah. Particularly because of the position that TEPCO's in.
Well, yeah.
And he's going to be making energy policy decisions.
Yeah, he needs, the smart thing to do, and again, politicians don't always do the smart thing, as I think history has shown. The smart thing to do would be to sell the shares and then no argument. And nobody can get rid of, or nobody can complain about it because he's gotten rid of the shares.
Even if he loses a lot of money out of it.
It's so simple. And for him to try to finesse it by saying, well, I have a national patriotic duty to hang on to these shares. Come on.
Real blow, though, to Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, considering these other high-profile...
You'd think he'd vet the candidates a little bit more.
Maybe he needs to get a lesson from Jokowi. Yeah. Because President Jokowi is able to vet his list.
It's early days in his
too early to be giving him some applause.
But Abe, you brought it up, it's bad for him, but he also had problems like this in his first term of office. So... it's more of the same.
No lesson learned there, probably.
Yeah, more of the same.
Okay, well, let's talk about some lessons learned in language. for our last article from the Washington Post, where it says Mark Zuckerberg deserves a lot of credit for speaking mediocre Mandarin. Facebook chief executive was at a business conference seminar at Tsinghua University in Beijing when he surprised students by speaking to them in Mandarin throughout the Q&A session. So what are your thoughts on this, Matt? We were talking about it a bit earlier. It's like kudos for the effort.
How's your Mandarin?
The execution,
My
not so well.
Mandarin is non-existent. I can speak maybe 2 words, but I think it was a nice segue you did, by the way. You got in there. But number one, when you're a billionaire, you can afford to take a few Mandarin lessons. So, I mean, he's got $30 billion, $20 billion, something like that. So
well, and his wife.
And his wife.
Well, time and money
or
is
you
one
could
thing,
say that you could afford not to. As well.
Not to, yeah. I love the thing in the was it the Washington Post, I think, where they quoted Samuel Johnson. It was like a dog walking on its hind legs. You know, it wasn't done well, but it was a surprise to see it done at all. I don't know that Zuckerberg wants to be compared to a dog, but, but no, I think it's very smart. And,
smart PR play.
It's a great PR play. It's good for business, and there are probably a few more doors yet to be opened before he gets to open up Facebook in China, before he gets unblocked. But I think he certainly stepped through the first door. He's in the courtyard of the house. Right now.
So you don't think this is about wanting to talk to his wife's grandmother at all?
Sure it is. I think absolutely it is. It's he wants to talk to his grandmother-in-law and all of that, just like he said.
The world's second largest economy, I think, and Facebook, one of the biggest companies. Well, I think it's smart to learn
Just
Mandarin.
imagine, I mean, it's got 1 billion users now, and it's not in China. It's not available in China, and it's already got 1 billion users. Imagine how much Facebook could be worth if, and by extension, Mark Zuckerberg, imagine the money that company will make if they get into China.
But is China going to allow that, though? Because, I mean, we've already seen this trend of Chinese tech companies, setting up similar
and doing
similar
well.
companies that doing very well.
I think what will happen is, I mean, you've got Weibo, you've got, Tencent, you've got Alibaba and all of that. As soon as they get every Chinese person signed up on their platform, they'll say, sure, come on in, and it'll be too late. Exactly. So, yeah, they'll let him in eventually. They'll let Facebook in eventually, but only after the Chinese version has captured all the users.
And imagine the power of a fluent Mandarin Mark Zuckerberg.
No stopping.
Well, I tell you, it makes a difference. And I mean, my wife is French. When we go to France and I speak French, again, it's not, my French is bad, but it's the effort that you put into trying that is appreciated. And I think that paid huge dividends for Zuckerberg and by extension Facebook.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Matt. Always an enjoyable discussion with you. Hope to see you more often now that you're here. Matt Driskill, the new executive editor for Foreign News at the Today paper. And don't go away. We have more coming up on First Look Asia, a wrap of U.S. markets overnight, and a preview of Asian trade this morning. Stay with us.